The first thing anyone ever hears is the sharp crack, hoof against timber, a sickening thud, and the splintered scream of fence posts giving way. Sterling bursts through the fence, muscles rippling, his hooves stained with something darker than mud. The camera closes in on the thick, iron-black hair around his legs, wet and slick, stamping over shattered wood. A flash of red glistens in the morning dew. People are already shouting, but their voices are muffled by the pulse pounding in your ears. In the grass, streaks of blood, last week's rider, maybe. No one's really sure anymore. A neon ambulance sits by the entrance, engine idling, paramedics watching the arena with tight jaws and folded arms. Someone is carrying an X-ray up to the judge's tent. Gray and white splinters on film, a wrist snapped like a dry twig, a femur split right down the middle, a tangle of screws and metal plates. A newspaper headline hangs from the table. Front page torn and faded, but the words are sharp. Killer horse strikes again. Is Sterling the devil of Willowbrook? People keep their distance. No one makes a joke now. 2 million pounds, close to $3 million. Some kid whispers. Is up for grabs, but it's hush money, really. Oliver Thornfield's estate, Willowbrook, laid out across miles of rolling Cotswold hills, old money that smells of polished leather and whiskey, the kind of place that names every blade of grass. He stands at the rail, blue eyes cold as the sky, his hands gripping the fence so hard his knuckles go white. He's made the offer public, dared anyone to try riding Sterling for 10 seconds. Just 10. Most folks wouldn't do it for 10 million. The Willowbrook crowd is restless. Over 200 people have gathered, some from the village, others from as far as London or Birmingham. Local farmers, grooms in borrowed jackets, old riding school friends with phones out, streaming to TikTok and YouTube. The press is everywhere, drones hovering overhead, cameras clicking with every snort or stomp from the black stallion in the ring. There's money changing hands in corners, quiet bets whispered under breath, odds being recalculated every time Sterling throws his head and gnashes his teeth. Sterling has killed 2 riders. Last summer, an up-and-coming eventer from Oxford, body thrown 20 feet, neck broken instantly. The year before, an army captain, decorated and fearless, but not fearless enough for this. 5 others limped away with broken bones, scars, night terrors. People say the horse is cursed. Some blame the bloodlines. Thornfield horses have always been sharp, always half wild. Others whisper about the girl who disappeared. 22 years ago, Sterling belonged to her. She was just a child when she vanished, never found. Some say she ran off. Others talk about ghosts, old secrets, curses that don't die. Tension crackles in the air like static before a storm. Everyone feels it. Something is about to snap. A drone pulls back, sweeping high over the estate. Willowbrook sprawls below, manicured lawns giving way to dark woods, a stone manor sitting at the heart like an ancient king in his castle. In the arena, Sterling stands alone, nostrils flaring, eyes rolling white, watching the crowd with a cold, animal intelligence. He's a monster, everyone says, but the way he moves, there's a kind of tragic beauty, like he knows he's being watched, judged, condemned. The crowd ripples, a wave of unease. Oliver Thornfield leans on the rail, his face carefully composed, but there's something haunted behind his confidence. He's lost more than riders to this horse, reputations, money, peace. Every time Sterling goes wild, another piece of the Thornfield legacy cracks. But he won't back down, not today. There's a dare in his posture, a silent challenge to everyone watching. Flash. Sterling trampling the memory of last year's champion, the scream echoing through the arena. Another flash. Ambulance lights strobing across the estate, paramedics wheeling a stretcher, a child crying in the background, whispered stories, old wounds that never healed. People shiver, pull their jackets tighter, and eye the nearest exits. The tension builds. No one moves. The announcer's voice crackles over the loudspeaker, struggling to sound upbeat but failing. Ladies and gentlemen, Willowbrook's infamous Sterling, 2 million pounds if you can stay on for 10 seconds. Any takers? There's a long, horrible pause. The crowd collectively holds its breath. Somewhere in the back, A young jockey fidgets, eyes wide, mouth dry. An old trainer mutters a prayer, fingers crossed in his pocket. The bookmakers scribble new odds on sheets, hands shaking just a little. Sterling paces, restless, hooves digging furrows into the soft sand. His ears twitch at every sound. Flashbulbs pop. Someone coughs. The tension is electric. Anything could happen. Out of nowhere, the world shifts. The main gate creaks open, and a figure steps into the light. At first, no one notices. She's not dressed like the others. No sponsor logos, no family crest. She moves with a kind of quiet, determined grace. The wind lifts her hair, golden brown under the early sun. She's wearing a cream blouse, a tweed jacket, boots that have seen real work, not just show ring polish. Her name is Isla Hartwell. No one recognizes her. Not yet. Sterling stops dead. For a split second, the killer horse freezes. His head lifts, ears pricked forward, every muscle taut as a bowstring. The arena falls silent, 200 voices cut off mid-breath. Isla walks, slow and steady, eyes fixed on the stallion, green and unblinking. There's something in her walk, not arrogance, but resolve, a hint of battle scars hidden behind perfect posture. She moves like she belongs, like she's been here before. A camera zooms in on Oliver's face. He's pale now, mouth slightly open, hands trembling on the fence. He knows something. He sees something none of the rest can see. The crowd's attention locks on Isla. Whispers start up. Who is she? Why does Sterling care? Is this another stunt? But deep down, everyone feels it. Something is shifting. Sterling's wild eyes are no longer murderous, but wide, searching, almost pleading. Flash. Close up on Sterling's nostrils, flaring with a memory he can't name. The crowd, frozen, waiting. Oliver, barely holding it together, all his secrets threatening to spill. The announcer's voice is lost. No one is betting anymore. No one even breathes. In that impossible, suspended moment, you realize, today, everything is about to change. The killer horse knows the stranger. But how? And somewhere in the trembling air between them, history wakes up, ready to tear the past wide open. Today, someone will try. And nothing at Willowbrook will ever be the same. No one at Willowbrook had ever seen the crowd go so silent. For a heartbeat, 200 conversations stopped in the same instant. Murmured bets, whispered prayers, snide comments about the killer horse, all snuffed out like candles in a sudden wind. Every face, from seasoned trainers to village kids with ice creams melting in their hands, turned to the young woman in the cream blouse and tweed jacket. It was as if the entire equestrian world paused, waiting for a signal that no one could name. Isla Hartwell didn't slow down. Her boots pressed through the soft, scarred earth of the arena, picking up red mud and old dust. Each step was deliberate, calm, the sort of walk that only belongs to people who have nothing left to prove. The only sound was the faint creak of the main gate swinging shut behind her, followed by the whistle of a sudden breeze through the hedge-lined fences. The wind tugged at her hair, catching sunlit strands and making them dance like firelight. Sterling, the notorious, beautiful, deadly beast, stood dead still. His sides heaved, steam curling from his nostrils. His tail lashed once, twice, and then froze. The monstrous stallion, so infamous for violence, for trampling riders and shattering bones, stared straight at Isla as if he'd seen a ghost. His ears snapped forward, every muscle coiled. The wildness in his eyes, moments ago dangerous, barely caged, shifted. Now it was something else. Recognition? Impossible? Oliver Thornfield's world narrowed to a pinpoint. From the far side of the arena, he couldn't look away. His chest hammered, a sick tension crawling up his throat. Isla's stride, the impossible calm, the way Sterling watched her. None of it made sense. For a moment, Oliver forgot the crowd, the money, the pressure, the cameras. He only saw Isla's green eyes, steady as a storm, her jaw clenched, her posture regal, yet scarred by invisible weight. The crowd held its breath. Parents pulled children closer. A young man with a bet slip crumpled it in his fist, mouth dry. An elderly groom, shaking, clutched a worn St. Christopher medal and muttered, Lord, let this not be another disaster. A camera caught Isla in perfect profile, cheeks flushed by wind, brows drawn in focus, lips pressed into a line that dared the world to challenge her. She looked every bit the English countryside elite. Crisp jacket, clean boots, posture like royalty. But her hands, bare and honest, told another story. There were tiny scars across her knuckles, traces of hard work, not soft privilege. Her hair, though neat, had a wild streak that the wind loved. Her gaze was different too. Where most young riders showed fear or pride, Isla's eyes held a deep, working-class struggle, the kind that comes from living close to the bone and never expecting a miracle. Sterling made the first move. His head dipped low, almost to the ground, but his eyes never left Isla's. He stretched his neck, a slow and cautious gesture, nostrils flaring as if searching for a lost scent, a memory buried beneath rage. The arena, the estate, the entire Cotswolds countryside felt smaller, tighter, as if everything was being drawn into the invisible line between girl and horse. A single gasp escaped the crowd, a ripple of disbelief. Some stepped back, others craned forward. Camera operators jostled for the shot, drones dipping closer. Even the bookmakers, busy scribbling wild odds, stopped to watch. Isla paused at the center of the ring. The battered fence, still splintered from Sterling's earlier rampage, framed her silhouette. She turned to face the crowd, just for a second. Her eyes swept the sea of faces, pausing briefly on Oliver. She could feel the weight of his stare, heavy as chains. But she said nothing. Not yet. Sterling shifted his weight, hooves pressing deep into the soft earth, but he didn't bolt. For the first time all morning, the stallion seemed curious. He cocked his head, mane falling over one wild eye, the same eye that had watched too many men fall beneath his hooves. Was it fear that kept him frozen, or something stranger? Hope? The crowd's stillness deepened. No one so much as breathed. Even the horses in the stables behind the grandstand went quiet, ears pricked, as if they too sensed something impossible unfolding. Oliver's hands trembled on the fence. Sweat prickled his brow, his mind racing with 22 years of half-buried secrets. Isla Hartwell. The name echoed in his skull. Hartwell. Elise's name. Was this possible? He hadn't seen Elise since she vanished, pregnant 2 decades ago. He'd heard rumors. A girl born somewhere up north, raised by a mother who never forgave, who swore she'd never set foot on Thornfield land again. And now, this? A memory stabbed at him. Elise's stubborn chin, her voice trembling with hurt and pride, her green eyes flashing when he'd tried to apologize that last ruined time. Had Isla inherited those eyes? Those hands? Sterling let out a snort. Short, uncertain, his ears flicked, his body tensed. The stallion was waiting. The killer horse, who'd sent 6 to the hospital and 2 to the grave, waited for Isla Hartwell like a faithful dog. The transformation was so sudden, so dramatic, that the crowd could barely process it. Another camera zoomed in. Isla's face, determined, calm, hiding something ancient and bruised, became the image beamed out to every phone and television in the village and beyond. One of the local trainers, a wiry woman with sharp eyes, whispered, "That horse remembers her. I swear he does. It ain't possible, but look at him." A boy beside her shook his head, voice shaking. Maybe she's just crazy. A chorus of whispers snaked through the stands. Ghost stories, fairy tales, old rumors about the missing girl and the haunted horse. But even the cynics had to admit, the evidence was right in front of them. Isla stepped forward. Sterling didn't move. His breathing slowed, the veins on his neck, standing out like rivers beneath black silk, pulsed with anticipation. Oliver finally found his voice, barely more than a croak. "What are you doing? Get out of there!" But Isla ignored him. Her entire world had shrunk to the silent dialogue between her and the stallion. There was a history here, ancient and raw, written in the scarred earth and the blood on Sterling's hooves. She extended her hand, palm open, fingers steady. The arena, every heart in the crowd, waited for Sterling to explode, to revert to the monster everyone feared. Instead, the stallion sniffed, inching forward, nostrils brushing her skin. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Something like recognition flickered in his gaze. A shudder ran through his body, not rage, not violence, but memory. Impossible memory. The tension snapped. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a shocked, disbelieving murmur. A storm of camera flashes, voices rose. Did you see that? Is he tame? No one's ever done that before. Oliver stumbled back from the rail, face ghost white. His secrets, Elise, the girl, the guilt, boiled up like a curse returning to claim him. Isla kept her hand on Sterling's muzzle, a silent vow in the touch. You remember me, don't you? But to everyone else, she was a stranger, a miracle, or a time bomb waiting to explode. Above them, the sky darkened just a shade, as if even the weather understood the storm brewing on Willowbrook land. No one in the crowd could answer the question now burning in every mind. How does a killer horse know this stranger? And in the tense, crackling silence, the legend of Sterling the killer horse was reborn. But this time, everyone knew the story was about to change forever. The air felt heavy, charged with a static that made every hair on Isla's arm stand on end. Not a single spectator dared to move. Even the flies, buzzing and hungry just moments before, seemed to hang motionless above the churned red earth. The world's focus, the heartbeats of 200 villagers, Oliver's terrified gaze, the lens of every camera, locked on Isla Hartwell and the horse that had earned his reputation in blood. Isla stood in the arena's heart, her palm still pressed gently to Sterling's muzzle. The stallion's wild black eyes, rimmed with white, blinked once, twice. His breath, hot and sour, misted in the cool morning air. Isla felt it on her skin, like a memory from another life. She reached for his bridle, her fingers moving with a precision that couldn't be learned in a few lessons or by watching from the stands. This was deeper, instinct or muscle memory, something ancient and bone deep. Sterling's ear flicked, and for the briefest moment the crowd thought he might erupt, another explosion of fury, another name for the headlines. But no. Sterling lowered his head. Isla's fingers found the reins, the bit, her movements as smooth and natural as breathing. With her other hand, she touched the old scar beneath his jaw, a wound so few knew existed. Sterling didn't flinch. A gasp rippled through the crowd. He let her near, let her touch. The same animal who had trampled men twice her size to pulp was quiet as a pond at sunrise. Cameras clicked, rapid fire, trying to capture the moment before it could vanish like a ghost. The commentator's microphone, forgotten, hung limp at his side. In the stands, a woman sobbed softly, her voice swallowed by the silence. Isla moved with absolute certainty. She checked the girth, ran her hand down the glossy length of Sterling's neck, and glanced over his legs, a practiced, loving sweep. Each action told its own story. The story of a girl who'd grown up with horses, not on a polished estate, but in muddy fields and cracked wood barns. She slipped her boot into the stirrup, every motion smooth and unhurried. Sterling shifted beneath her, tense but unafraid. Isla gathered the reins, mounted with a grace that made even the old riding masters blink in wonder. For the first time in years, the Willowbrook arena didn't feel like a graveyard. Now the moment everyone dreaded and secretly hoped for arrived. Isla, straight-backed, heels down, legs steady, urged Sterling forward. She did not jab, did not kick, simply whispered, "Come on, then." Her voice was barely audible. But the horse heard. The world held its breath. Sterling stepped out, and the miracle began. The timer flashed across every screen. 10 seconds. A heartbeat crescendo, then silence. 9. Sterling, who had thrown off champions and battered generals, trotted a perfect, collected circle. Isla rode as if the two of them had spent a lifetime together, her hands feather-light, her posture at once proud and humble. The crowd's terror turned to awe, then to a feverish, collective gasp. 8. Isla sat deep, her legs whispering instructions. Sterling's head dropped, muscles rippling. A horse transformed, no longer the monster, but something closer to a legend returned. 7. Flashbulbs strobed. Oliver Thornfield gripped the fence, face drained of blood. His world teetered. He watched Isla move. And suddenly he saw Elise, the girl he'd once loved, reflected in every line of Isla's body. 6. A little girl pressed her face to the rail, tears on her cheeks, voice barely above a whisper. Mom, she's really doing it. 5. The crowd was no longer a mob, but witnesses to something impossible. Every old bet, every whispered story about the missing girl, the haunted horse, seemed to combust into light and air. 4. Isla leaned forward, whispered something into Sterling's mane. The horse flicked an ear as if listening to an old friend. 3. Sterling slowed, extended his stride, then gathered himself, moving like poetry, like forgiveness on 4 legs. 2. No screams, no violence, just a miracle unfolding in real time. 1. The timer reached 0. Isla sat up, breathing hard but smiling, a tremor of disbelief and joy breaking through her calm mask. The crowd erupted, no longer able to restrain themselves, a wall of cheers, applause, and shouts. Some dropped their phones, others wept. In the history of Willowbrook, nothing like this had ever happened. Isla slipped off Sterling, landing lightly on the earth. The stallion turned, pressed his nose to her shoulder, as if needing reassurance that she was real. Oliver collapsed against the fence, legs buckling. He stared at Isla as if she were a ghost. He knew, deep in the oldest part of his heart, exactly who she was. The press mobbed the ring's edge, shoving microphones and cameras forward. Questions rained down. Who are you? How did you do that? Are you magic? Are you not afraid? Is this the lost girl? Was that really Sterling? Isla ignored them all. She stroked Sterling's cheek, letting her tears mix with the dust on her hand. She pressed her forehead to the stallion's. And in that silent exchange, something old and broken began to heal. The community, for a heartbeat, remembered why they loved horses. The wild hope, the heartbreak, the miracles that seemed impossible until they happened before your eyes. Behind the crowd, hidden in the shadow of the manor house, a single old woman wiped her eyes, recognizing the shape of Elise in the girl standing tall in the ring. The legend of Sterling was broken, remade in a single ride. The monster, the killer, had shown grace, memory, loyalty. Isla had ridden him not as a conqueror, but as a daughter reclaiming what was lost. Oliver closed his eyes, gripped the fence until his hands ached, and wondered if he could face what he'd run from for so long. The crowd, roaring, didn't notice the cracks forming in the lives of Willowbrook's oldest secrets. And as Isla led Sterling from the ring, she caught Oliver's gaze. Green eyes steady, full of accusation and hope. She knew, he knew, and for Willowbrook, nothing would ever be the same. The thunder of applause still echoed across the Willowbrook arena when Isla slipped from Sterling's side and walked, head held high, straight toward the man leaning heavily on the fence. The crowd, swept up in a current of disbelief and euphoria, parted unconsciously, making a path through the press and spectators as if drawn by the same invisible force that had brought her here. Oliver Thornfield looked older than his years. Sweat trickled down his temple, and his jaw clenched tight, as if he was bracing for an earthquake that only he could feel. Cameras shifted, zooming in, every eye following Isla as she crossed the arena, dust rising around her boots. The energy was electric, expectation hanging thick as a thundercloud ready to break. Isla didn't hesitate. She stopped in front of Oliver, shoulders squared, green eyes blazing with the kind of storm only the betrayed can carry. Her voice cut through the noise, clear, sharp, slicing the summer air. I'm not here for your money. I'm not here for your game. I came to face the man who abandoned my mother. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the stands like wind through tall grass. Someone dropped a phone, a clatter lost in the rising voices. For the first time, Oliver couldn't hide. His entire world, his secrets, his reputation, his dignity, hung exposed before 200 witnesses in a dozen rolling cameras. Isla pressed on, the words coming not as accusation, but as the cold, unbending truth. My name is Isla Hartwell. My mother is Elise Hartwell. 22 years ago, you left her. Left us. All these years you built your world on lies, but today, the truth stands here, in front of you, and it won't be buried anymore. The effect was instant, a shockwave tearing through the crowd. The Thornfield legacy, carefully guarded for generations, crumbled in a single breath. People looked from Isla to Oliver and back again, faces twisted in disbelief, curiosity, even satisfaction. Every old rumor about Oliver, every whispered story about the girl who vanished, now took on new, blinding clarity. Oliver's lips parted, but no words came. His hands shook, gripping the rail as if to keep from collapsing entirely. Behind him, Sterling stood motionless, his great head turned toward the confrontation, an almost human wisdom flickering in his dark eyes. For a second it seemed as though the horse, too, understood that history was being rewritten. The press, sensing blood in the water, surged forward. Microphones jabbed the air. "Did you know, Mr. Thornfield? Is this true? Is she really your daughter? Why did you abandon her? What about the estate? Isla, what do you want?" The questions overlapped, chaos building at the edge of the ring. Isla raised a hand, silencing them. "I want nothing from you, except the truth. Not your land, not your money, not your sympathy. I want you to tell these people who you really are. Tell them about my mother. Tell them what you did." A hush fell, thick and ominous. Even the crows circling the field seemed to pause, hovering on the edge of a storm. Oliver's face twisted, guilt and defiance wrestling across his features. The years of denial, the habits of privilege, the instinct to hide, all failed him in this moment. He tried to speak, found his mouth dry, tried again. "Elise, you don't understand." Isla's jaw locked. "Oh, I understand plenty. I understand my mother waited for you until waiting broke her. I understand you chose your family name over your own child. I understand that every scar, every night, she worked 2 jobs. Every time I wondered why I didn't belong, that was you. Not the estate, not Sterling, you." A low, wounded moan rose from the stands. The older villagers exchanged glances. Memories of Elise, the girl who loved horses, who vanished one cold spring night and never returned. Faces that had avoided Isla's gaze now looked at her with something like awe or shame. Flashbulbs stuttered. Oliver wiped a trembling hand across his face, sweat mixing with tears he refused to shed. He looked at Isla, really looked, as if seeing his own past, his own failure, reflected in her eyes. The silence burned. 30 seconds. That's all Isla gave him. 30 seconds. Watched by the world to deny or admit the truth. Oliver Thornfield, once lord of all he surveyed, now just a man cornered by the consequences of his own choices. He swallowed, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Isla, I tried to find you. I did. Your mother. She made sure I couldn't." Isla shook her head, voice quiet but unyielding. Don't put it on her. She did what she had to do to survive. You're the one who left." He looked at his hands, at the dirt beneath his nails, at the crowd hungry for confession, for closure, for drama. Every escape closed, every lie ran out of road. Finally, Oliver raised his head. His eyes, for the first time in decades, held nothing back. He looked straight at Isla, then at the crowd, and let out a shaky breath. "Yes, it's true. Elise was the love of my life. I was young, stupid, afraid of my family, of what they'd do if they knew. I left her because I was a coward. I left her. And you," there it was, the truth, laid bare for all to see. A tremor ran through the crowd, pity, anger, vindication, all at once. The press feasted, their questions now a wild storm. Isla stared at Oliver, tears in her eyes, but no forgiveness yet. Not today. Behind her, Sterling moved closer, his presence a quiet shield. The community, so long divided by gossip and old money, watched as the scandal of the century detonated in real time. For some, it was a reckoning. For others, a relief. For a few, a chance to finally start healing. Oliver's reputation, polished and untouchable for decades, crumbled to dust before a single truth. He sagged against the fence, spent. Isla, voice raw, asked the only question left. Why? Why didn't you ever come back? Oliver, broken, replied, I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But the shame, the fear, it ate me alive. By the time I found the courage, it was too late. Your mother was gone. You were gone. The past, like a ghost, drifted over Willowbrook. Every secret, every lie, every moment lost, laid bare in the summer sun. In the silence that followed, Isla turned to the crowd. This is who he is. Not a lord, not a legend, just a man who ran from the only thing that ever mattered. The spell broke. The crowd erupted, some in applause for Isla's courage, some in outrage at Oliver's confession. Others simply wept, feeling the weight of a story, 22 years in the making, finally crashed to its end. But the truth, once spoken, could not be unspoken. And in the ruins of pride and legacy, something new was just beginning. As Oliver stood exposed and Isla claimed her place, everyone at Willowbrook knew nothing would ever be the same. A cold wind whipped across the Willowbrook arena, scattering the last shreds of applause like brittle leaves. The sun, so bright just moments before, slipped behind a dense bank of clouds, and the temperature seemed to drop in an instant. The crowd's roar splintered into hushed, urgent voices, people turning to each other, desperate to confirm what they'd just witnessed, torn between shock, sympathy, and something like hunger for more. In the center of it all, Isla Hartwell stood still, her breathing shallow, eyes shining with a storm she could barely contain. For years she'd pictured this moment, her father exposed, the truth dragged out from the shadows. But nothing in her imagination had prepared her for the sound of Oliver's broken confession, or the way the crowd now pressed in, eager to claim a piece of her pain. She could taste the bitterness at the back of her throat. It felt like victory. It felt like loss. Sterling, the great black stallion, moved closer, nostrils twitching, his enormous frame radiating calm and strength. To the crowd, it was a miracle that the killer horse stood so quietly at Isla's side, as if sensing that the danger now was not in his own rage, but in the human wounds being ripped open. Sterling's presence was a silent witness, a reminder that pain, loyalty, and survival often lived side by side. Across the fence, Oliver Thornfield looked utterly defeated, shoulders hunched, face drawn and pale, eyes red from tears he hadn't let fall in public for decades. He met Isla's gaze with the look of a man drowning. Around them, voices rose and fell, a tide of opinion and gossip. You could hear it everywhere. He deserves this. Poor Isla. It's about time. Think of the estate. What about Sterling? Whispers that cut as deep as any accusation. A sudden voice cut through the crowd, sharp and accusing. You ruined her life. Why'd you even show your face, Oliver? The speaker, a broad-shouldered woman in muddy riding boots, jabbed a finger toward the broken man. A few people cheered her on, anger bubbling up, years of resentment against the Thornfields finding a new target. But before Oliver could reply, another voice, equally passionate, shouted from the far side of the ring, That's enough. This is between them. None of you know what really happened. An older man with silver hair, once a close friend to Oliver's late father, tried to restore dignity, but the line had already been crossed. The crowd was splitting, taking sides as quickly as old wounds could be remembered. Flashbulbs strobed as journalists circled, catching every tear on Isla's face, every tremble of Oliver's lips. Some in the crowd moved closer to Isla, forming a protective ring. Others clustered behind Oliver, muttering about betrayal and the shame of family secrets made public. The atmosphere thickened, charged with a tension that belonged more to a battlefield than an equestrian showground. Isla felt the anger swelling in her chest, a lifetime's worth of hurt clawing its way to the surface. She saw her mother's face. Isla Hartwell, young, beautiful, exhausted, working 2 jobs to keep a roof overhead, never complaining but never forgiving. Every holiday missed, every birthday spent in silence, every time Isla had watched other children with their fathers, each memory burned with the acid of abandonment. Now, for the first time, Isla let that pain speak. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with fury. You didn't just abandon my mother. You abandoned me. Every day. Every night. I waited. I wondered what was so wrong with us that you could walk away. Oliver tried to answer, voice breaking. Isla, please. But Isla pressed on. You knew she was pregnant. You could have found us. You could have done something. But you chose your family name over your own blood. I grew up with nothing. She gave up everything. You gave up nothing but your conscience. The crowd went silent again, drawn into the gravity of Isla's heartbreak. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. Her hands clenched into fists. Sterling brushed her shoulder with his nose, warm breath grounding her, a reminder that she was not alone. Oliver's guilt was written across every inch of his face. He shook his head, helpless. You don't know what it was like. My family threatened to disown me. The estate, the business, the name. None of it would have survived if I'd married beneath my station. I was scared. I was weak. Weak. Isla's laugh was sharp, pained, bitter. You had everything: money, power, respect. My mother had nothing but me. And still, she never broke. She raised me on hope and hard work and stories about a better life. You hid behind your gates, your lawyers, your pride. Don't talk to me about weakness. A new tension spread, an ancient, stubborn war between classes. The villagers and stable hands murmured, some nodding along with Isla, remembering years of exclusion and arrogance from the Thornfields. Old friends of the family looked away, shame coloring their cheeks. For decades, Willowbrook had been divided, upstairs and downstairs, old money and new struggle. And now the lines were being drawn again, right in the open. Someone shouted from the crowd, "It's always the same with you people." And others responded, voices rising, tempers flaring. The showground became a courtroom. Isla and Oliver, the unwilling stars of a drama that was bigger than either of them. For a brief moment, Isla's anger faded, replaced by exhaustion, a weariness that settled in her bones. She looked up at the sky, gray now, with the promise of rain. She wondered if her mother was watching, somewhere beyond the clouds, and if this reckoning could ever be enough. Sterling stomped, drawing attention back to the arena. His calm, his silent watchfulness became a strange sort of anchor for both Isla and Oliver. The horse's steady gaze seemed to judge them both, witness to all that had been lost and all that might still be saved. Oliver stepped forward, his voice stripped of arrogance and artifice. I know I can never make it right. I know I failed you both. But I am here now, Isla. I'm not running. Not this time. The words hung in the air, fragile as glass. Isla searched his face for sincerity, for a trace of the man her mother once loved. She found only sorrow and the faintest hope. The crowd slowly quieted, the storm of accusation passing for a moment. Teams had formed. Team Isla, standing with the wronged daughter. Team Oliver, standing with the broken father who now begged for forgiveness. The estate's history, its legacy, its wealth, all of it felt irrelevant compared to the raw, human story unfolding at its core. Rain began to fall, cold and insistent. People raised jackets, pulled children close, but no one left. They needed to see what came next. Isla stood tall, letting the rain wash away her tears. She turned to Sterling, pressing her forehead to his, closing her eyes. It was over. It had only just begun. In the distance, thunder rolled, a promise that the storm inside the ring was far from finished. And as Willowbrook held its breath, Isla and Oliver faced each other, no longer father and daughter, but adversaries in a war of truth, love, and painful reckoning. Rain splattered the Willowbrook arena, slicking the battered boards and painting streaks across Isla's face. The crowd's anger had cooled, replaced by a hush, almost reverent. People leaned forward, straining to hear every word, knowing the air was thick with secrets about to be revealed. Oliver Thornfield stood under the low, gray sky, hat in hand, exposed in a way no amount of money or family pride could shield. The truth weighed on his shoulders, decades of regret written in every tired line of his face. Sterling, still as a statue, stood at Isla's side, the only constant in a world unraveling. Oliver raised his head, rain mixing with sweat and shame. He spoke, voice trembling. "Let me tell you, all of you, what really happened." He didn't try to hide. Not anymore. His words were halting at first, but grew steadier as he continued, as if confession was the only freedom left to him. "When I met Elise, I was just a boy. A Thornfield. That meant something back then. It meant everything. Expectations, reputation, inheritance. My whole life mapped out before I even had a say." The crowd listened, spellbound. Older villagers nodded, recognizing the weight of old money, the cruelty of tradition. Oliver's eyes darted to Isla, then back to the earth. "My family never wanted me to leave Willowbrook. They never wanted me to love anyone who wasn't one of us. But Elise, she was different. She made me want to be brave. She made me dream about a life outside all this." He looked at his hands, water streaming down, as if trying to wash away the guilt. "When Elise told me she was pregnant, I thought I could fight for us. I promised her the world, but then my father found out. He told me if I didn't end it, if I didn't come back to the family, I'd lose everything. The land, the horses, the name. He said I'd shame us all." A few in the crowd scoffed, old wounds reopening. "So what? You picked money." But most just waited, drawn to the raw pain in Oliver's voice. "I was scared. I told Elise I'd come back for her, that I'd find a way. But the truth is, I ran. I chose comfort over courage. I hid behind my last name, and it cost me both of you." The silence stretched. The rain intensified, drumming on Sterling's back, washing Isla's tears into the mud. She didn't speak, didn't move, but the muscles in her jaw tensed with every word. In her mind, images of her mother flickered. Elise, proud and pregnant, alone in a cold apartment, waiting for a letter that never came. Oliver's confession poured out, how he'd watched the seasons turn, how regret had eaten at him every night for 22 years. How every time he saw a young woman riding across the fields, he wondered, "Is that my daughter?" "I hired private investigators," he said, voice barely above the wind. "I needed to know, needed to see if you were real. I wanted to find you, Isla, I swear it. But your mother, she made sure I never got close. She changed her name, moved towns, did whatever it took to keep you safe from me. I can't blame her. I don't." The crowd shifted. Some faces softened, others grew hard. The pain of old choices, old prejudices, hung between every word. Isla finally spoke, her voice steady but laced with anguish. "You let her do it alone. She gave up everything for me. She waited for you to fight. But you just watched your own life slip away." Oliver stepped forward, voice breaking. I know I failed you, but it wasn't just fear. It was the system. My father told me, marry beneath your station, and you're nothing." The Thornfield name meant more to him than love, than blood, than happiness. "I was a coward, Isla. But I was also a prisoner." Isla's fists clenched, knuckles white. "Don't tell me you were a prisoner. You had the key the whole time. My mother, she was never given a choice. She was abandoned, and so was I." A tremor went through Oliver's frame. He looked at the crowd, at the estate behind them, at everything he'd once thought unshakable. All of it seemed small now. The rain fell harder, blurring faces and soaking clothes. But nobody left. Willowbrook, usually divided by class and history, now stood together in shared discomfort, forced to confront the cost of silence, of pride, of old wounds left to fester. Oliver's voice turned to pleading. I know an apology isn't enough. I can't bring back the years. But please, let me try to do what's right. For once. Let me make it right, Isla. Sterling stamped, the sound sharp in the rain, as if warning that easy forgiveness wasn't on offer. Isla shook her head, voice trembling. I don't know what right even means anymore. I didn't come here for your money or your land. I came to see the man behind the stories. I came to face the truth. And now you have, Oliver whispered, sagging against the fence, more defeated than ever. The murmurs in the crowd began to rise again. What will she do? Will he leave? Is the estate hers now? But no answer was clear. The moment hung suspended, fragile as glass. Oliver looked at Isla, raw and honest, for the first time. I only learned your name 6 months ago. My private investigator found you, told me you'd come back to England, that you'd started writing again. I thought, maybe I could meet you. Maybe I could explain. I didn't think it would be like this. Isla's eyes flashed. You thought you could control the story, that you could spin it in your favor. But you never had control, Oliver. Not over me, not over Sterling, not even over yourself. A flash of thunder rolled over the fields. Oliver flinched, but Isla stood firm, shoulders squared, heart pounding. The crowd, now soaked and shivering, pressed closer, as if the cold couldn't touch the heat of the drama unfolding before them. Sterling, sensing the tension, stepped forward, nudging Isla gently, a wordless reminder that she was not alone in this storm. Oliver wiped his face, hands trembling. Maybe I never had control. Maybe all I can do now is surrender to you, to the truth, to whatever justice looks like now. Isla nodded, her voice suddenly small. Justice isn't revenge. Justice is the truth. And now everyone knows it. The spell broke. Some in the crowd began to applaud. Others turned away, lost in their own thoughts, wondering what parts of their lives had been shaped by secrets and pride. But the confrontation wasn't over. Oliver drew a deep breath, raised his voice so everyone could hear, and announced, Today, in front of all of you, I will do what I should have done long ago. And with those words, the next act began. The rain eased for a moment, mist curling above the Willowbrook arena, leaving the ground soaked and shining under a brittle gray sky. The air was thick, charged with something electric and final, a sense that centuries of pride and pain were about to be judged, not in secret, but in the eyes of all. Oliver Thornfield stood tall, his jacket clinging to his frame, face lined with both defeat and determination. Isla watched him, jaw set, heart hammering in her chest. The crowd pressed closer, their curiosity bordering on awe. Rarely did the great dramas of life and legacy play out in such raw, public light. The estate staff clustered by the stable doors. Townsfolk lined the white fences, and journalists lifted their cameras once again, ready to immortalize whatever came next. Oliver cleared his throat, voice steady now, echoing across the soaked sand. Enough, he said. No more hiding, no more running. For 22 years, I let my family's shame guide every decision. Today, that ends. I will not ask for your forgiveness, Isla. I do not deserve it. But I can give you what I should have given you from the beginning. He motioned to a man waiting at the side of the arena, a local solicitor, old and formal in his black coat, carrying a thick folder of legal documents sealed in plastic against the rain. The solicitor stepped forward, flanked by 2 community witnesses, and handed the folder to Oliver with a solemn nod. Oliver opened it, hands trembling. He held up a heavy piece of parchment, the estate's deed, its corners embossed with the Thornfield seal. The hush was absolute. No birds, no whispers, only the faint sound of rain on leather and stone. He spoke, voice clear. This is the deed to Willowbrook. Every acre, every building, every horse. It is worth 20 million pounds, maybe more. For generations, it has been handed from father to son, guarded by pride and tradition. Today, I sign it over to my daughter. He reached for a pen, pausing only to look Isla in the eye. This is not about money, Isla. This is about what is right. The estate should have been yours. You are my blood, and no amount of class, history, or cowardice will change that. I can't give you back the years. But I can give you the future. A murmur rippled through the crowd, shock mixing with envy and admiration. Never in living memory had a Thornfield given up the estate, and certainly not so publicly. The solicitor guided Oliver's hand to the signature line, where he scrawled his name with a heavy, trembling stroke. The witnesses stepped forward, adding their own signatures, making it legal, binding, undeniable. He handed the pen to Isla. She stared at it, breathing fast as if the entire weight of Willowbrook, the land, the history, the blood, hung on this moment. Her fingers closed around the pen, steady but cold. She hesitated, heart pounding in her ears. The crowd held its breath, some hoping she'd accept, some hoping she'd refuse, all aware they were watching the estate's destiny change forever. Isla signed. The solicitor announced, "It is done. The Willowbrook estate now belongs to Isla Hartwell, by right and by law." Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, the sound rolling across the drenched hills. In the stands, people cheered, others wept. Old loyalties broke apart, new ones formed. Oliver wasn't finished. He motioned for another document, the lead rope to Sterling. He walked over to Isla, the big black stallion watching with wise, steady eyes. Oliver held out the rope. Sterling was your mother's, and now he is yours. Isla took the rope, swallowing back tears. Sterling nuzzled her, as if sensing the enormity of the moment. All her life, Isla had felt outside, never belonging, always struggling. Now, the keys to her own history, and her mother's, lay heavy in her hands. Oliver stepped away from her, his voice quieter, but no less certain. "I will not stay. This place was poisoned by my choices. I will leave Willowbrook today. It's yours to heal or to destroy. Either way, the curse ends with me." The words struck the crowd like thunder. Even those who had resented the Thornfields fell silent. Some looked at Oliver with respect for his courage. Others couldn't hide their relief. A few shook their heads, unable to accept that the world could change so quickly. Rain began to fall again, softer this time, as if blessing a field newly sown. Oliver turned to the crowd, his voice trembling but proud. "For too long, this place has been a monument to secrets and shame. Let it be something better now. Let it be a home for hope." He walked out of the arena, head high, coat flapping in the wind, the weight of the past falling away with every step. No one stopped him. No one dared. Isla stood alone in the arena's center, Sterling at her side, the deed and the rope in her hands. The crowd watched, waiting, uncertain if she would embrace the estate or turn her back on it all. A little girl pressed against the rail, eyes wide. "Will you stay, Miss Hartwell? Will you save the horses? Will Willowbrook be happy now?" Isla knelt, her voice gentle but sure. "I don't know what the future holds, but I promise I'll try. For my mother. For Sterling. For all of you." The crowd erupted, not just with cheers, but with a kind of cautious hope, a sense that something sacred had shifted. Even those who doubted her, who clung to the old divisions, felt the power of the moment. In that storm-lit arena, Isla Hartwell became not just a daughter or a legend, but a symbol. A promise that history's wounds could be healed, that courage could be learned, that even the greatest curses could be broken. Lightning flashed, illuminating the estate, the hills, the ancient trees. Thunder answered, a wild applause from the sky. And as the last of the old Thornfield pride vanished down the muddy road, Isla held Sterling's rope in one hand, the deed in the other, and whispered, "We're home." At last. But as the villagers drifted away, 1,000 new questions swirled. Would Isla accept her inheritance fully? Would the community support her or tear her down? Would the ghosts of Willowbrook finally rest? Or had a new battle only just begun? For Isla, the future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, it was hers to shape. The days that followed the transfer of Willowbrook were unlike any Isla had ever known. The air itself seemed to hum with nervous energy. Half the village waiting for miracles, half expecting disaster. By noon the next day, the news had spread far beyond the Cotswolds. Reporters camped on the estate drive, trucks from London news stations crowding the sleepy lanes, satellite dishes blooming like alien flowers among the hedgerows. Headlines screamed from every screen. Heiress claims cursed estate, killer horse returns to lost daughter, Willowbrook revolution. Inside the manor, Isla wandered unfamiliar halls, the old timber floors creaking under her boots. Portraits of Thornfield ancestors stared down at her, some with pride, others, it seemed, with warning. She'd spent the first night awake, pacing, Sterling's quiet breaths coming from the stable outside her window. She'd tried to write a letter to her mother, but every word felt too small. There was no way to explain what it felt like to finally belong somewhere, and at the same time, to feel more alone than ever. By morning, the fractures in Willowbrook had split wide open. Protesters gathered outside the gates, some carrying hand-painted signs, others banging on pots and pans. "We want our Willowbrook, no outsiders. Bring back the Thornfields." The old guard, the families whose names had been intertwined with the estate for generations, eyed Isla with open suspicion. She heard the whispers wherever she walked. "She's not one of us. She's here for the money. That horse will kill again." But there was another side, too. Younger villagers, tired of the old-class boundaries, stood with Isla. Some hung banners from their windows. Justice for Isla, a new start for Willowbrook, Sterling's home at last. They came with baskets of bread and jars of homemade jam, nervous but hopeful. A few brave children slipped under the fence, desperate to see the infamous horse with their own eyes, holding out apples with trembling hands. The Crown and Anchor Pub became the heart of the conflict. Every night, voices rose over cheap beer and battered wooden tables. Old friends found themselves on opposite sides of a line no one had drawn until now. Heirs to the farm across the lane slammed their pints and muttered, "She'll never last." A young teacher snapped back, "Maybe it's time someone else had a chance." The landlord, caught in the crossfire, just shook his head, polishing the same glass over and over. Isla felt the tension wherever she went. Her first morning in the village, she tried to buy bread at the shop. The woman behind the counter, gray hair pinned tight, stared at her with a look that could freeze water. "We don't want trouble here." "You'd best mind your own business." In the post office, a group of men fell silent when Isla entered, their laughter dying mid-sentence. Someone spat at her feet. Out in the street, she passed a group of teenagers who called her names she'd not heard since childhood. Bastard, fraud, witch. She kept her head high, but her hands trembled as she counted her change. At the same time, messages of support arrived, sometimes in secret. A mother slipped her a note. "Don't let them break you. My son saw what you did with that horse. He believes in you." An old man left a sack of oats at the stable door. "No one needs to know who helped you. Just feed him well." Sterling became her only constant. He followed her everywhere, his huge shadow a comfort as much as a warning to those who still remembered his past. In the field, Isla would press her forehead to his, the world shrinking to the warm, living silence between them. She told him things she couldn't tell anyone else, about her mother, about the dreams that woke her in the night, about the ache of finally being seen and instantly judged. Sometimes, at dawn, she'd find herself sitting on the old stone wall overlooking the estate, the mist curling through the hedgerows, the manor looming behind her. She wondered if she could ever truly call it home. She wondered if the ghosts, her mother's pain, Oliver's regret, all the history soaked into the earth, would ever set her free. But Willowbrook was not done testing her. The mail brought threats, scrawled in childish block letters. "Get out. You don't belong here. Leave before it's too late." One night, she found the stable doors smashed open, Sterling pacing, eyes wild, sweat darkening his coat. Someone had thrown rocks through the tack room window. No one saw who did it. The police came, took a statement, then left with polite words and tired eyes. Isla refused to leave. Each attack only made her more determined. She worked from dawn till dusk, fixing fences, tending horses, learning the land as if it might one day forgive her for claiming it. She met every glare with a nod, every curse with silence. The community could throw everything at her, but she would not run. Not after what her mother had sacrificed. Not after Oliver's public surrender. The divide in the village grew. Supporters began to form a loose network around Isla, helping where they could, repairing gates, bringing tools, watching the estate at night. Her enemies grew louder too. A group of men waited outside the pub one evening, blocking her path. Their leader, a thick-set farmer with hands like shovels, stepped forward. "You can't buy your way into Willowbrook, girl. You can't ride a killer horse and expect us to forget what he's done." Isla faced him, heart pounding. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance." He spat in the dust. "A chance is earned." For a moment, Isla thought he might hit her, but something in her eyes made him pause, shoulders slumping. The men drifted away, leaving her alone under the yellow pub lights, the sounds of laughter and argument echoing behind her. The pressure built day by day. Online, too. Articles went viral. Comment sections exploded with rage and support. Some called for Isla to be driven out. Others declared her a symbol of hope for a changing England. Through it all, Sterling remained her silent guardian. He was the first to sense trouble, ears flicking, head lifting at the approach of strangers. On the nights when sleep wouldn't come, Isla would walk the fields with him at her side, the darkness pressing in but never closing over her. Then, one evening, as Isla returned to the manor, a note was waiting, pinned to the door with a knife. A single line, written in block capitals: "Leave now, or you won't get another warning." She read it 3 times, hands shaking. Then she walked to the stable, lay her hand on Sterling's broad neck, and whispered, "They want me gone. But I'm not running. Not now. Not ever." The storm had come to Willowbrook. The world was watching. Isla had a choice: stand her ground, or be driven out by hate and fear. And as the clouds gathered above the manor, she made her decision. Let them come. The evening air was thick with anxiety. Clouds pressed low over Willowbrook, bruised purple and gray, their bellies threatening more rain. Lanterns flickered through the manor's great windows, their glow casting long shadows across the gravel drive. Every path, every hedge, every cobblestone seemed to hum with the same question: would Isla stay, or would the ghosts of the past finally drive her away? The town meeting was set for the Grand Hall, a space built to impress, with vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows showing scenes of hunting, harvest, and old Thornfield glories. Tonight, though, there was no comfort in the grandeur. Chairs lined the length of the room, every seat filled, others standing 3 deep at the walls. Isla could feel the eyes of 2 centuries of Thornfield ancestors watching from their portraits as she entered, Sterling's lead rope in her hand. He stayed just outside, head poking in through the open door, his presence a silent promise that she would not face the village alone. Oliver had returned, unannounced. Rumors flew. Some said he'd been living rough in a nearby town. Others claimed he was seen at his late mother's cottage, staring at old photographs. No one really knew, but his appearance now, leaning in the shadows at the back of the hall, made the tension thicken. At the front of the room, the village council sat like judges. Their faces were grave, some hostile, some sympathetic, all tired. The council chair, a wiry man with a pinched mouth, tapped the gavel and called the meeting to order. Isla stood, heart pounding, every muscle tight. She looked at the crowd. Old enemies, new allies, faces she'd grown to recognize in these long, bruising weeks. Some looked away. Others stared, challenging her to flinch. The chair's voice echoed. "We are here to vote on the future of Willowbrook. There have been protests, vandalism, threats. We have a duty to decide if Miss Hartwell," he paused, scanning the crowd, "should remain as owner or relinquish the estate." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few shouted, "She earned it. She doesn't belong here." Voices overlapped, anger and hope in equal measure. The chair banged his gavel. Enough. Miss Hartwell, you may speak. Isla stepped forward, her boots loud on the old oak floor. She steadied her breath, remembering every lesson her mother ever taught her. Don't let them see you shake. Don't let them take your voice. She spoke, clear and steady. You all know who I am. You all know why I'm here. I didn't come to Willowbrook looking for a fight, but I also didn't come to hide. This place is part of me. My mother worked herself to the bone so I'd have a chance at a better life. I'm not here to erase your history or claim what isn't mine. I'm here because the future of this estate, in this village, can't be built on secrets and shame. Someone shouted, "You brought trouble, not hope." She met his eyes, steady. No, the trouble was here, before me. I just refused to hide it. For years, Willowbrook has been split. Old money and new blood, upstairs and downstairs. I know what it is to have nothing. I know what it means to work for every scrap of respect. I've felt your anger. I've felt your hope. But I am not the enemy. She paused, letting her words sink in, the hush as deep as the night outside. You want to judge me? Fine. But judge me for what I do. Judge me for the hours I put in, the horses I save, the way I treat your children when they come to see Sterling. Don't judge me for what you think you know about my blood. Sterling let out a low whicker, the sound rolling through the room, a reminder that even the so-called killer horse stood by Isla's side. The arguments began, first civil, then heated, then passionate. A woman stood. She's given us nothing but trouble. We never had police here before, another man countered. She's brought business, attention, hope for the young. A third, voice trembling. My family's worked here for 4 generations, and I say let her prove herself. Give her a chance. The debate swung back and forth. Old wounds reopened, old kindnesses remembered. Some wanted the safety of the past. Others longed for the promise of change. Finally, the chair called for a vote. All in favor of Isla Hartwell remaining at Willowbrook, raise your hands. Hands shot up, some fast, some slow. Isla counted, her heart in her throat, all opposed. Almost as many hands. The room split, red-faced and murmuring. The chair counted, lips moving, sweat beating at his brow. He looked up. It's even, dead even. 50-50. A long, suffocating pause. Sterling stomped outside, snorting at the tension. The chair wiped his forehead. Well, we need a deciding vote. Tradition says, in a tie, the family whose name is on the oldest deeds has the final say. Every head turned, toward the back of the hall, toward Oliver Thornfield, his face pale but resolved. He stood, straightening his battered jacket, and walked slowly forward. His shoes echoed, his presence heavy with the weight of the past. He faced the council, then the crowd, and then, finally, his daughter. I left Willowbrook because I was a coward. I left my daughter because I thought that's what a Thornfield should do. But Isla is more Thornfield than I ever was. She has courage I never showed. She's faced this village, this estate, this legacy, and she hasn't run. She's changed Willowbrook. Maybe now Willowbrook can change too. He looked at Isla, pride and regret mixing in his eyes. My vote is for Isla. She stays. A roar of reaction. Some cheered, some shouted in outrage, but the die was cast. The council chair nodded. By tradition and by vote, Isla Hartwell remains the owner of Willowbrook. A few stormed out, but most stayed, caught between relief and uncertainty. Isla felt her knees go weak. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathing, barely believing it was real. Oliver leaned in, voice soft. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I'm proud of you. Make this place something better. Sterling pushed his head farther into the hall, earning nervous laughter. Isla walked to him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered, We did it. We really did it. The meeting broke, people milling, arguments still flying, but the center of gravity had shifted. The future of Willowbrook, of Isla, was her own at last. But Isla knew it wasn't just a victory for herself. In that hall, something had changed for everyone. The estate would not return to secrets nor to simple divisions. There was work to do, horses to save, bridges to build, and at last, the chance to begin again. Outside, the rain stopped. The moon broke through the clouds, silver and bright over the land. For Isla, the final battle was over. But a new story, one of healing, hope, and hard-won peace, was just beginning. Dawn came quietly to Willowbrook, the sun rising gold over the Cotswolds, painting the estate with fresh light. For the first time in weeks, the air felt gentle, washed clean by rain, as if the land itself was finally ready to start over. Mist drifted across the paddocks, blurring the scars of old fences and trampling. Birds sang from the hedgerows, their calls rising above the distant sound of hooves and the soft voices of people at work. Inside the manor, Isla stood at the window of what was once the master bedroom. She watched the world awaken, a world that was, at last, hers. She breathed deeply, letting the morning fill her lungs, heart still pounding with the disbelief of victory. Her hands rested on the window frame. Steady now, the weight of legacy transformed from burden to responsibility. Down in the stable yard, Oliver was waiting. He wore old riding clothes, face weathered but peaceful, his eyes lighter than Isla had ever seen them. She met him at the gate. For a long moment, neither spoke, the silence saying what words could not. Finally, Oliver broke the hush, his voice quiet. "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you stayed." Isla nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. It was never about staying or going. It was about finding where I belonged and making something new. Together, they walked the paddocks, boots soft in the dewy grass, Sterling following close behind, his coat shining in the sun. The horse was calmer now, no longer the monster of headlines, but a leader, a guardian. He nuzzled Oliver's shoulder, then Isla's, as if claiming them both, bridging the pain that once separated father and daughter. They paused at the far field, where a mare grazed quietly, her sides swollen with new life. Sterling stood beside her, tail flicking, ears twitching. Isla watched as the foal, a small, wobbly-legged colt, black as midnight with a white star on his forehead, took his first steps in the grass. She knelt in the mud, laughing softly. "Look at him. He's hope, Oliver. He's the proof that things can begin again." Oliver nodded, watching as Sterling guarded his little family, gentle and fierce. He turned to Isla, a question in his eyes. "What will you do now?" She stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "I'll make Willowbrook a sanctuary. Not just for horses like Sterling, but for anyone who needs a place to start over. Rescue, rehab, retraining. There are so many thrown-away lives out there, humans and animals both. Maybe if we open our doors, the world will meet us halfway." Oliver smiled, proud, uncertain, hopeful. "And the people, will they accept it?" Isla looked out over the hills, where villagers were already gathering, some carrying tools, others leading children by the hand. "It won't be easy. Some wounds run deep. But I've learned that respect isn't given, it's earned. If I show up every day, no matter what, maybe, just maybe we can build something better." Throughout the morning, the estate buzzed with new energy. The barns echoed with the hammering of repairs, the laughter of volunteers. Old enemies came with olive branches. One brought nails and timber, another baked a pie. Still, another apologized, awkwardly, for words thrown in anger. The village policeman offered to patrol at night, vowing Willowbrook would be safe again. Even the children who once called Isla names now raced to the paddocks, pressing their palms against Sterling's flank, whispering secrets and promises to the foal. Inside the main house, Isla transformed the drawing room into a meeting hall, flyers tacked to the mantelpiece, chalkboards listing chores and plans. She met with local charities, animal welfare groups, young people needing a second chance. She opened the old kitchen, baking bread with anyone who showed up. The smell of yeast and hope drifted through the halls, stronger each day. Oliver took up work in the stables, tending to the oldest horses, sharing stories with anyone who'd listen. For the first time, he seemed content. A man learning to live without the armor of pride. At night, he and Isla sat on the back steps, watching the stars, speaking of the past and the future with honesty that once felt impossible. Seasons changed quickly on the estate. Autumn brought a riot of color, maples and oaks blazing red and gold. Harvest time saw the first festival at Willowbrook in decades. Music played late into the night. Old boundaries faded, young and old, rich and poor, newcomers and old names dancing under the same lanterns. Through it all, Sterling remained at Isla's side, his legend transforming from terror to trust. He became a symbol, not just of survival, but of redemption. When new horses arrived, starved, frightened, half wild, he greeted them with quiet strength, teaching them the language of belonging. The foal grew fast, bold and beautiful, chasing children through the grass, leaping fences that once felt like prison walls. Isla named him Phoenix. Every time she watched him, she remembered the worst nights, her mother's tears, her own hunger, and loneliness. She promised herself and the world, no one left behind, not here. 6 months after that stormy summer, Isla stood once more in the arena. The village gathered, this time not in judgment, but in celebration. Sterling trotted in circles, Phoenix at his heels, the crowd cheering, laughter echoing where once there had only been fear. Oliver stood at her side, his hand on her shoulder. "You did it, Isla. You changed everything." She squeezed his hand, eyes bright with tears. "I didn't do it alone. No one can." A reporter from London called out, "Is this the end of the Willowbrook curse?" Isla smiled, sunlight catching the green in her eyes. There was never a curse, only wounds that needed healing, only stories waiting to be rewritten. As applause swept through the arena, Isla lifted Phoenix into her arms, the foal whickering, Sterling nudging them both. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, bright, wide as the Cotswold sky. And as the sun rose higher, bathing Willowbrook in gold, Isla knew forgiveness was possible, if not forgetfulness. Healing took work. But hope. Hope was as simple as a new day, a foal's first breath, a family found, and a community finally whole. So began the real story of Willowbrook, one of resilience, grace, and the kind of love that could turn any ending into a beginning.